Thank you very much once again. So I will start with Professor Magnet, our first presenter. Um, this would be a quick question. You are a legal counsel to the Afar Nation. You have championed their cause on the global stage, advocated persistently for Afar rights within Eritrea and elsewhere, and provided expert guidance on the constitutional matters. How can we how can the First Nations experience in Canada and legal precedents from the UN declarations on the rights of Indigenous people be leveraged to challenge Eritrea into compliance? That's uh, one part of the question. The second part is what constitutional framework from autonomous regions around the world could empower the Afar while preserving Eritrea's territorial integrity and sovereignty? That is my question, Professor Mike.
Small questions, right? Ah, okay. Well, I think the Canadian experience is very instructive. We have a Canadian experience from 1867, the formation of the Canadian Federation, to 1973, which was the first Supreme Court of Canada decision recognizing Indigenous rights. After 1973, there was programming to develop the Indigenous peoples that has grown to the present day to be more than $12 billion annually, some 5% of gross federal expenditure. If we take that long horizon and we look at the condition of Indigenous peoples from 1867 to 1973, when programming started, what do we find? Underdevelopment, crime, poverty, misery, some threats, a huge overrepresentation of Indigenous peoples in jails, and dysfunction in many of the 643 First Nation communities. That's not something we want to reproduce. And I really appreciate Samai's intervention, saying, look, if you change course and you treat self-determination, if you treat control of resources as nation building things, not as threats, you would do better. Well, our experience is that from 1973 to the present day, 2025, with progressively implementing programming to develop Indigenous peoples and progressively recognizing their rights to lands, resources, autonomy, culture, governance, social systems, child welfare, this sort of thing. What's changed? Well, we find, dramatically depressed levels of poverty, social dysfunction, criminality. We find that, we're not a perfect society, far from it, but this change, seeking reconciliation, seeking rights implementation, has produced a stronger Indigenous community or communities all across the nation, with exceptions, and a stronger Canada. So, I think our experience stands as, the good, the bad, the ugly, and what we can aim to achieve. On the second question, things are going to be difficult in Eritrea. There is very unlikely, what you have is a totalitarian society, a totalitarian style of governance. When you survey the evolution of totalitarian governance, it's not pretty. There's no path to democratic transition. This would have to be staged. The most likely transition after Isaias is another set of authoritarian rulers. Um, it's a very worrisome prospect. I totally agree with John Packer that war is not the first option. It's likely to produce much misery. Nobody responsibly would advocate that, and I don't. But war may come to this territory, and if it does, then the transition looks a little different than what if war comes and Ethiopia is successful, what should be its goals? Well, it's got a model that Afar can support. That might be a model that gets imposed on Eritrea. That is something to think about, to prepare for. We don't advocate it. That's not what we hope comes about. What we hope comes about is liberalizing a set of authoritarians and progressive implementation of a human rights regime and a power sharing constitution. And we're trying to build a constituency for that, their work now. We're trying to explain what that might look like. That's what we're all about, how a peaceful transition can come to liberalize that state and ultimately bring it into compliance with its human rights obligations under the international human rights system. I think, we have to be realists. That's unlikely to happen without much intervening misery, but, our role is to show the pathways, to be realists, and to support the liberalizers and the Democrats.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Professor Magnet. That's amazing. One day, Canada's model of constitutional governments will reach Eritrea, and hopefully all Eritreans can benefit from this wonderful country here in Canada, where Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people are benefiting from the system that is upholding everyone's rights. So we're grateful for that answer. My next question would be to Professor Packer. After the signing of the 2018 Ethiopia-Eritrea Peace Accord, tension seems to be growing between Ethiopia and Eritrea once again. Eritrea has just left IGAD, the regional bloc. There is a talk in some quarters that Eritrea obviously during that, during the peace accord in 2018, some of us are from the region. I'm from Asab. The asphalt road leading from Eritrea to Afar regional state into Ethiopia was already 70-kilometer asphalt was already done. People were hopeful that finally Ethiopia and Eritrea has passed their conflict and war situation, and there was peace on the horizon, collaboration of economic benefit for all the countries. But obviously Eritrea backed up from that peace agreement. Other conflicts happen. Unfortunately, the Afar situation remains the same. Marginalization, economic neglect is all the reality to our people. I guess my question to you is, drawing from your expertise in conflict prevention, inclusive governance, and political tensions, as well as UN agencies' guidance on minority rights, peace mediation, and traditional governance. How does ensuring justice and representation of minorities, like the Afar, amid growing regional influences and disruptive state-building agendas, contribute to sustainable peace beyond the mere presence of war?
So, first of all, just to correct you, it's not traditional governance. We're done transitional arrangements. Exactly what you're talking about. So the empirical reality or fact is that peace agreements, negotiated peace agreements, at least since the end of the Second World War, have a terrible, a poor success rate of surviving past 2 to 5 years. The majority of them start to dissolve from 2 to 5 years. And there are various reasons why this is so, but my own observation, and many people agree with this, is that we place a huge focus on the actual agreement, and especially the investment of the politics and those that support it to reach an agreement. We see this all around us. We may see the same right now going on in Ukraine, Russia, all about getting some agreement signed and not thinking too much about what actually happens the next day. And there are often those who sign it, have some ceremony, then disappear. So I would say the fact that the Eritrean-Ethiopian agreement was signed 2018, we're already 7 years since then or more. My question is, what happened after signing the agreement? Nowadays, in the field of conflict resolution, we don't talk about agreements, we talk about quality agreements, the character of the agreement, and what we're looking for are mechanisms and institutions that help translate the agreement into practice. I have worked on this in many situations. I'm advising a couple right now in different parts of the world, one of which is very publicly initialed in Washington. But I'll give you an example. I advised on at the end of the peace agreement in Aceh, between Aceh and Indonesia. But what I really worked on was the transition and the elaboration of the law on the governing of Aceh, which is a special autonomy arrangement within the constitutional framework of Indonesia. And that created the structures and institutions that persist today or continue today. So I don't know what's happened in your region, but my concern would be what are those steps and especially relationships subsequent to the agreement. They may not even be identical to the agreement. For example, in the case of Aceh, I can tell you other examples, not every part of an agreement is fully or even at all implemented. Sometimes the written agreement exceeds the ambition or is problematical in practice. We can give many examples. For example, agreements that include things like referenda to be taken that are then never adopted. But a relationship is established and practices and institutions that allow for peace to continue and maybe to be built upon. My concern in your situation, what I would look for, are there relationships ongoing or have they stopped? Have they broken down? So are the affected communities talking? Do they have institutional arrangements to talk, including if they are frustrated, but at least they can share or exchange views about their frustrations? Things are not good if these relationships fracture or cease to exist. I would be always looking at what are the dynamics of those contacts. Are they engaged, especially in practical issues? For example, and they can be anything. I don't know what the practical significant issues would be in your situation. but they can be small things like just managing a border crossing, or we talked about water, or trade, or all sorts of practical things. Small steps, but many of those small steps that are reliable and consequential are in some kind of progress, or point in a direction of maintaining the peace, are vital. And I would focus on those. I think what happens in many situations is groups get very frustrated, and then they throw up their hands and they walk away. The costs of losing the agreement are enormous. And by the way, let me add one other unfortunate empirical fact. When an agreement fails, it is actually more difficult to return to the negotiation. In other words, it's not like you just start from the beginning again. Trusts are broken, the antipathies are greater. So I would say at almost all costs, one must try to maintain the relationship. And even if it is slow and frustrating. And I would try always to find inventive ways of animating relationships, for example, through mutual associates. That's why I mentioned outside actors or allies. Sometimes the obvious parties are not the best intermediaries. For example, the UN these days is very much, frankly, discredited. A lot of the same actors who may be known but are not persons in whom much confidence is held. EGAD, you mentioned, has broken down. So I think one has to find alternative means. For example, there could be other actors who might not be obvious ones. We have discovered in the last few years that China has played very significant roles in all sorts of peace processes on the simple basis of plain interest. You might have seen last week they resolved or helped reach peace between Cambodia and Thailand. Of course, they did famously between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and many other situations. I'm not saying, by the way, that I like in the long term some of the methodologies, but when the alternatives are war, I think one must exhaust every possible means and try to maintain these relationships.
That's amazing, John. Professor Bakker, this is really very important points you raised there. You know, sometimes the unseen is what comes through, you know, and I really appreciate that. My next question is for Professor Babakir. This is a bit a long list of things, but I'll make it short. Please bear with me. Professor Babakir, your predecessors, Sheila Keita-Root, stated in her 2013 report the following about the Afar. In 2013, the Afar people have been subjected to extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearance by Eritrean government since 2000. These killings have triggered their displacement from the land within Eritrea and across border to Ethiopia, Djibouti, posing great difficulties to their livelihood as they depend on the traditional land for sustenance as indigenous ethnic group. In 2015, the United Nations Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in Eritrea, an independent investigation by 3 experts, including Sheila Keita-Root, concluded that Eritrean officials have committed crimes of persecution, crimes against humanity, and against the Eritrean Afar population since 1991. The report also documented the existence of mass graves. In 2018, the Special Rapporteur reported that Eritrean government continues to pursue a land policy that legitimized the forcible displacement and dispossession of indigenous populations and minorities. Again, in 2020, another Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Eritrea, Ms. Daniela Kravitz, reported that the This is a quote: "The sustenance and the livelihood of Afar communities remain under threat in Dankalia region." In 2023, your own report, investigative report, concluded the Afar are one of the most disenfranchised communities in Eritrea. For several decades, they have been subjected to discrimination, harassment, arbitrary arrest, disappearance, violence, and widespread persecution. There is a unique pattern here, Professor Gabakir, of crimes against humanity of Afar in Eritrea show that the government is not slowing down until all Afar people are cleansed from this territory in Dankalia. My question to you is, which international mechanisms could be leveraged to hold Eritrea accountable beyond what we have already seen for persecuting indigenous Afar communities? Which legal instruments, including constitutional amendments that Professor Magnet have talked about, the way forward, might be facilitate Afar self-governance and autonomy within Eritrea? Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed, for this. Actually, regarding the first question related to international instruments, and I guess here you are talking about the justice mechanisms with
Yes.
regard to what has been committed. And this is one of the most difficult areas in terms of international justice, international criminal justice, given experience in other countries, including my country, Sudan, related to, for example, the genocide committed by al-Bashir regime in 2003, and also crimes against humanity. And this requires, like, in my view, for accountability, first of all, you need to have proper documentation, and also reports which actually amounts, or evidence amounts to evidence that could be used in courts. And the COI report, it is one of the mechanisms that could be used as part of the evidence to be submitted to, if any, if there's a change of regime in the future, could be used as a base for the prosecution of international crimes, including crimes committed against the Afar people, including disappearance, extrajudicial killings, torture, rape. So this could be used as part of, if there is a tribunal to be set up, that will be important in terms of, like, prosecution. However, you need to have the proper evidence in terms of proper documentation. Sometimes our reports are regarded as monitoring reports. In other words, they are not regarded as conclusive report in terms of evidence to be used in courts. But however, it could be used for further investigation. The other difficulty with regard to prosecution of these crimes is no one will predict what will happen after post SCS regime. And this is no one can predict what will happen. Internally, I'm not optimistic with regard to Eritrea, because you need to have institutions, viable rule of law institutions. And Eritrea, since independence, these institutions were not created. And then the other option may be resort to regional mechanisms, or ad hoc, or hybrid mechanisms to be, but this requires resolutions to be adopted by the Security Council. And Eritrea has many friends. They can easily veto these resolutions. as I said, it depends on the political dynamics on the ground. One of the issues also is important. I think a viable mechanism to use the universal jurisdiction. And I advocated for this in my report, that countries can actually prosecute those who actually committed crimes in Eritrea, provided that they have their own national laws to prosecute crimes committed in Eritrea, irrespective where they were committed or against who they were committed. So some countries they can use universal jurisdiction in order to prosecute such crimes. And I think this is a possibility, even without any regime change. Also, some mechanisms could be used by indigenous groups, like the system of the African Commission on Human and People Rights. There are some cases brought by some Eritrean organizations. One of them is actually the case of the journalist, Isaac Daoud. Other cases related to disappearance and arbitrary, and also cases brought in front of the working group on arbitrary detention. And actually, these bodies provided very good judgments, and this could also later will be used as further evidence for prosecution of more crimes. So I think there is many mechanisms could be used as a UN level, at regional human rights system, to advance the cause of the Afar people. However, there are some challenges. There's a lot of challenges in terms of because sometimes these decisions were not implemented. Some decisions were actually issued by the African Commission on Human and People Rights 10 years ago, were not implemented by Eritrea. And this is an issue related to the some loopholes in the international human rights system in terms of its enforceability. Yeah, so I hope I managed to answer your question, Ahmed.
Thank you very much. Yes, you have wonderful answers. I appreciate those, and those mechanisms, especially within African context, could be very helpful for us going forward. Appreciate your time, Professor Babakir. Is Sumaya, can you hear us? I have a quick question for you as well.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So Sumaya, your organization, Congress of Nation States, has tirelessly promoted indigenous people's right to control of natural resources. Eritrea, facade, but it prides itself as a tiny, resilient nation projecting global image of self-sufficiency, capable of feeding itself, its population. But the government deliberately stopped accepting any form of foreign aid, including US aid and World Bank loans, etc. It won't allow any local or international NGOs to operate in the country unless they work with the government, partnering selectively with countries like China and Russia, and those which care less about human rights record. So this facade of self-reliance of Eritrean state, or the self-sufficient nation, as it claims to be, are far from reality in the ground. In Dankalia, for example, the government deliberately deprives indigenous Afar fishermen of ability to fish within their coastal territories. It severely restricts their movement, confiscated their boats, and imposes this exuberant taxes on the people, thus impoverishing them and imprisoning them. Those who are unable to pay these fines are locked up in prisons for decades. So the Eritrean government imposed this an economic embargo on the Afar, indigenous Afar population, exploiting their natural resources, deliberately starving them, and compelling the core of their Afar society to abandon ancestral lands and traditional territories. The people that you've witnessed on the ground today is the core of Afar people. Afar sultanates have exiled, Afar traditional leaders have all left this country because of this economic embargo and political repression. In the context of Eritrea's policy of economic marginalization, how does international law affirms indigenous people's right to autonomy, control of resources, specifically in the Afar case in Dankali?
Thank you for raising up this important question and for all this what you explained. And even if I'm new in the context of Afar, but the point is that we are facing, it's not, as I said, in the Afar region only or in Eritrea or Ethiopian. It's a systematic way most of the government do in different contexts. And this is the point, is that we can't say there is an only one solution, or there is 1, 2, 3 you have to do to solve this problem. It's all what we are trying to do, me, you, and I think all of the people who's with us today, that we are trying to rise up the problem, trying to salute it and highlight what is happening on the ground, and making these voices is here, not to disappear without knowing that it's happening. We are facing challenges, even for the ground people or the people who's in broad, because maybe they face challenges for this to fight this facade, what you are saying. But the point again is that there is no one solution or magic power to solve it. So if you are asking me how we are dealing with this, we are trying to make a platform for these voices to be heard, to reach out with states, with other nations, with global networking, to emphasize what is going on. But for a one answer, I'm sorry, I don't know if any other panelists have an answer for this.
Thank you so much, Sueya. That's great. It's understandable. There is a state like Eritrea is a complicated state with no way out. And I know this is a difficult question for anyone to answer. It's you know, the control of resources, especially in Dankalia. This is the most resourceful area in the country. You know, it's the strategy is there. For example, there's 7 or 8 superpowers are vying to get their hands in it. Across our territory, there's United States, China, Japan. All of these superpowers are stationed there. You know, it's in some ways we are cursed to be in this geopolitical time bomb area. So we appreciate your work that you do in Congress of a Nation of States, and we will definitely work together in try to have some kind of solution to solve all these problems that our people are facing. Brother Wade, the final question is to you. You are no stranger to Afar people, and of course, you've been to the Afar region 17 times, if I'm not mistaken, since our first visit to the Afar. And since then, you have established Kango Afar Foundation, a humanitarian organization providing advocacy, post-secondary education, and helped with the number of Afar refugees settled in third country settlement, including those Afar communities who live here with us here in Canada. And we really appreciate the work you've done for our people. My question to you is the great work that Kango Afar, the organization like Kango Afar Foundation is invaluable work addressing the immediate needs of the Afar population. In your opinion, what is the long-term sustainable solution can address their systematic marginalization, safeguard their and safeguard their democratic rights within Eritrea? That's part A of my questions. Number two is, given the Afar people's marginalization in Eritrea, including denial of political and cultural representation, how can their grievances can be urgently addressed and their rights protected?
Thank you. To be short, because of the time that we've all devoted to this and the weariness that 3.5 hours being on a panel causes each of us.
That's right. And appreciate your time.
Well, you got me involved in it 19 years ago. I got Professor Joe involved in this 15 years ago. He got Mohammed Babakar with great ideas and his predecessors involved. Between the two of you, you got John Packer involved.
Now John is involved.
Yeah,
and Sumaya is involved.
You got Sumaya involved.
Yeah.
I mean, it's teamwork, and you have to be a bit of a spark plug to get these things done. Whether that's the Kango Afar Foundation and its charitable status and the private fundraising we've done here in Canada, deploying that to humanitarian causes, and far more than you've mentioned on your list that we've done there. I mean, that's a start. But having gone there many times, I realized the biggest problem was not the poverty. I got involved because of the poverty in Ethiopia. But when I got there, I saw the refugee flowing out of Eritrea into 2 refugee camps that were being built in the Afar region, one in Amadela and one in Asaita. We went to them both, you and I. We saw the surveying being done. We saw what was coming. What was coming was a long-term commitment by the UNHCR and by the ARA administration in Ethiopia, recognizing that this refugee flow, as big as it was then, was not going to end and would continue for so many years that they had to build schools, they had to build clinics, medical clinics, they had to build more or less, permanent structures to accommodate the homes of the families that were coming. And then I realized, okay, this is not about getting them clothes and getting them food and getting them. This is about the bigger problem across the border. That's why I got Professor Joe involved, because he understands this better than I do, even to this day, although I've learned a lot. He understands regime change. He understands what's needed. So my practical point, which I'll end this answer with, is this. Okay, Afwerki's been in power since '93. Okay, he's a dictator, he's a tyrant, he's an oppressor. He's not going to suddenly change. Okay, nor will his family when he's gone. He's 79 years old. If he dies out of natural causes or is overthrown, there's no way the incoming, power structure is going to suddenly, roll over and say, let's have a democratic, form of government, a constitution, and all the institutions to support it. So I think what needs to be done now, and hopefully some of it is already underway, is to get to the military there and its leadership, to get to civil society and its leadership, to get to all the community elders in all the different nationalities, of which there are 9, and get them now to buy into this bigger dream, this bigger vision that all boats float higher when you have a federal form of constitution that recognizes all the rights that every human being on planet Earth wants to enjoy. If you don't get to them now or soon, well, I mean, we can't speculate or assume that if that regime collapses or Afwerki dies, that the new one is going to suddenly embrace all these wonderful things we've talked about today. So you have to, the Afar being a small minority, have to work with the other nationalities, which I know you've tried to do, and hopefully you've had some progress and more will happen. You got to get to these, thought leaders, I'll call them that, in the universities, in the religious institutions, in civil society and beyond. You got to get to them, and you got to look. It's a long, hard process to convince them of the value, but you need to have the empirical evidence, which we've heard from the experts today exists, to show that the most stable societies, the most prosperous societies, are one where there's some amount of sharing. And again, it's not ever going to be heaven, and it isn't heaven here in Canada, but you got to get to them now or before now. You know what they say? When's the best time to plant a tree? The answer is 20 years ago. When's the second best time to plant a tree? Today. So if it wasn't done 20 years ago with what I'm describing, it needs to be done today so that you have some sense of hopefulness and achievement of progress, that digs them out of the horrible oppression that is just so commonplace there and taken for granted. That's my answer.
And that's a great one, Brother Wadi. I really appreciate the time that you have taken to join us. If you have any last minute thought, it would be great. But on behalf of Afar Nation, on behalf of the Horn of African Policy Center, we really want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your expertise. This is a cause of the underdog. You are assisting the people who really needs your help, and most of us here are, all of us, I would say, are committed to the improving lives and lives of not just the Afar people, but people in general. So I cannot thank you enough for all the hard work you do, and I want to thank you, and I want to wish you a happy New Year, and thank you once again. Appreciate all the hard work that you guys have done, and really love you all for your contribution.
Thanks everybody.
And
Thank you so much.
Ahmed Youssef, for your hard and tireless work. We really appreciate that. You're a great man.
Thank
Happy
you so
New Year
much.
all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll keep in touch. We keep in
And
touch.
we're going to Samara next year to pick up these
Thank you,
gifts that
Samir.
we were just given in person.
Absolutely. We will go sometime this summer. Mark your calendars. We're gonna go and see the people that you just saw inside Zoom. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For
All the best.
all of you for this session and for organizing this conference. It was my pleasure to attend and to learn from your experiences. So really
Thank
appreciate
you, Sister Sumaya. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Have a
Take
great
care.
day.
Okay.
Bye.